Some fighters are so formidable and skilled that even the greatest fighters are hesitant to face them. Going back in time, Charley Burley was one such fighter, a master technician avoided by the very best champions. Even the great Sugar Ray Robinson, often hailed as the best pound for pound fighter in history, apparently said, "I'm too pretty to fight Burley." This statement alone speaks volumes about Burley's reputation in the boxing world at the time. But despite his incredible talent, he remains one of the most overlooked figures in boxing history. Today, I'm going to dive into the story of Charley Burley, a man who never got his shot at a world title. While I'll break down some of the strategies, techniques, to understand why he was so revered by those who saw him fight. So on that note, let's get right into it. Charley Burley was born in 1917 in Bessemer, Pennsylvania, growing up in the Great Depression. Burley faced a tough environment. His father, a coal miner, passed away when Charley was just 8 years old, leaving his Irish mother to raise him and his siblings in Pittsburgh. It was here though that Burley discovered his passion for boxing, which provided an escape for his challenging circumstances. At 12, Burley joined the Boxing K Boys Club and quickly excelled under the guidance of local trainers Leonard Payne and Howard Turner. He achieved significant success in the amateur ranks, winning city, state and national junior titles, including the Golden Glove senior title at welterweight. Despite his amateur success, Burley declined an invitation to join the US team for the 1936 Berlin Olympics due to his own personal objections against the racial and religious persecution in Germany at the time. Burley, though, would turn professional in 1936, rapidly establishing himself as a formidable opponent with his massive power, incredible defensive skills, and counterpunching ability. His mastery of boxing set him apart from most opponents at the time. Despite his undeniable talent, Burley never received a shot at a world title, as many would say he was too good for his own good. Several factors would contribute to this, including the mob-controlled boxing scene at the time, which marginalised fighters like Burley, deciding who would get the title shots. Charley was not known for having the biggest personality outside the ring as well, being a man who stuck to his faith and was quiet outside the ring, while his complete pure boxing style wasn't widely appreciated as well, despite him having massive punching power and the ability to beat much larger opponents. Additionally, the racial and political climate for Burley's era systematically denied talented black fighters opportunities to compete for world titles in that time. While Burley also fought during World War II, a time when many of the titles were put on hold, including the middleweight title, which was the division he fought at the time. With all these obstacles, he became a prominent member of the famous Black Murderers Row, a group of highly skilled middleweight contenders in the 1940s and 50s, who were avoided by the top fighters and promoters. These men had no choice but to fight each other in a quasi-tournament due to the lack of opportunities. Many considered Burley the best of the bunch. Champions such as Henry Armstrong, Tony Zale, Jake LaMotta, Rocky Graziano, and of course Sugar Ray Robinson all steered clear of Burley, fearing his skill, power and defensive prowess as being too much for their own ability. Despite consistently being rated in the top 10, Burley never received an official world title shot, forcing him to fight opponents across various weight classes much higher than him, and even going on to face the likes of Archie Moore and Izzard Charles. To put things into perspective, Burley was probably a natural welterweight, and he famously beat heavyweight J.D. Turner by TKO, which is just crazy when you think about it. His career record of 83 wins, 12 losses and 2 draws, and 1 no contest includes victories over 3 world champions in 3 different weight categories, with 50 of those wins by knockout. Despite his remarkable skills, sadly only 1 fight was ever recorded, and that was his bout against Oakland Billy Smith. However, from the limited rounds and footage from this fight, we can uncover the brilliance of how good Charley Burley was. Now, to show you how ahead of his time Charley Burley was, I may include examples of more modern fighters who have used and still use his techniques to this day. to give you a better idea of the techniques and strategies he used back then and how they are still very relevant to this day. I want to emphasise as well that the available footage of Charley Burley's fight against Billy Smith, Charley was fighting a much larger opponent. Smith was closer probably to a light heavyweight, while Burley was somewhere between 147 and 160 pounds. This fight is particularly valuable for studying techniques for facing a bigger opponent, showcasing Burley's skill in overcoming size and weight disadvantages. But now let's look at the individual areas of Burley's style and techniques. Charley Burley's stance and style were revolutionary, as he was an early adopter of that side-on bladed shell guard stance. This defensive posture minimised the target area presented to opponents, keeping his head off the centre line to his right, something you see a lot in the old school styles and boxing greats. And standing out of that orthodox stance, he would often use a lower lead hand, positioning himself behind the shoulder while employing quick linear footwork to evade danger. His foot positioning and balance were also instrumental to his success, allowing him to maintain stability and control. And from the available footage, it's clear Burley was a master counterpuncher. He placed a lot of weight on his back foot, enabling him to return punches with a powerful backhand, or when pushing off the front foot when throwing the lead hand, a technique we'll explore in more detail shortly. His stance combined with his exceptional ability to slip punches, use quick footwork, and counter with precision made him a formidable pure boxer and a difficult opponent to crack. Charley Burley was also a master with his lead hand jab, using it in a variety of innovative ways. With his lead hand often in a lower position, he frequently employed an up jab, which was highly effective against conventional guards as it came from a lower and less visible angle. Burley used his jab to target and occupy his opponent's guard, probing at each of their hands to disrupt their rhythm and nullify their offensive options. The strategy allowed him to control the range and pace of the fight, while we've seen many modern day greats use this to their benefit as well. He could also easily double and triple up his jab, adding to its unpredictability. However, from the available footage versus Billy Smith, probably his most famous and signature move was that inside slip power spear jab. He would change the level of his head to his left before landing a powerful jab up top, pushing off the left side to generate the explosive power. While throwing it like this would help split through the guard, while the spear jab is also a lot faster to throw from there due to the thumb up positioning of the punch. Here's Jeff Mayweather explaining, and also Mike Tyson using this.
When you're in a competition and a guy is swinging at you and you got good head movement, you can get out the way, and you're here and you slide under. And it's almost like an uppercut, but it's actually a sideways jab and it's up.
He also varied this move by throwing a shovel hook to the body or head from the same setup, sometimes even throwing the right hand, which I'll discuss later. And this overall made his attacks even more dangerous and unpredictable for his opponents. Now on to one of the most important areas, Burley's footwork, which was very fundamental and balanced, even with his more bladed stance. From watching the footage of his fight with Oakland Billy Smith, it's evident that the footwork was his first line of defence. He often used backward shuffles, sliding the back foot first before the left foot, without compromising his fundamental position. This slower shuffle might appear as if he was running or trying to get away to the untrained eye, but as a counterpuncher, it was a strategic move to draw in leads or keep his opponent off balance, thus creating openings. When this didn't suffice, and Smith pressed forward, Burley would use a quicker retreat, making his opponent miss with their punches, giving him the opportunity to shuffle forward and attack again, before retreating again. Here's a short clip of Bernard Hopkins discussing the importance of fighting on the back foot and how it can be useful.
Backing up is I'm trying to get in position because I see openings if I take a step back and back up and set them up coming in and catch them coming in.
You're trying to lure him.
Lure him in and set traps for him by backing up and getting him to extend himself, trying to connect with his punches. So yeah, I'm opening up opportunities for me to either counter, to set traps, but mainly set traps.
From the limited footage available though, Burley demonstrated his ability to escape from being backed up against the ropes with a quick shift off his right foot, moving towards the centre of the ring to instead put Billy Smith on the ropes. This move is reminiscent of the D'Amato shift used by Mike Tyson.
Punch combination behind the jab. Whoa, swing around on your opponent's side.
From this clip, Burley employed it to get out of danger. Additionally, Burley used the angle changes to position himself to set up attacks from different angles, while he often circled to his left, a tactic I'll discuss in more detail later in the video. Now, although Burley clearly had power, as evidenced by his 50 knockouts from his record, he doesn't knock out Billy Smith in the available footage. However, we can see that he does have significant power in that right hand, where Smith clearly looks to be hurt at times. Instead of throwing the right hand as a conventional cross, he often threw it as a right hook to the body, or as an overhand right. This was usually preceded though by a feint with the left hand or a jab. The right hands to the body were particularly effective in lowering his opponent's guard over time, a tactic useful against taller boxers, or to open up their defense. And this right to the body can be a risky punch to throw if not at the right range, or if you are not ready defensively to move out the way. Canelo Alvarez was someone who actually used this strategy against Amir Khan. By throwing the right to the body over time helped to lower the guard, only to help set up the knockout.
Job of cutting off the ring here in the fourth.
Canelo, that beautiful right, hard body shot right there. So I don't think he's really hurt. And here you see a beautiful body shot right to the body by Canelo. Those
Shots, as well as taking away his energy and every.
right here, feinted the jab. He didn't want to hit the jab, just feinted him to get close enough and close the door with the kitchen sink. And that's how you put a guy out.
And this leads me back onto Burley, as when facing Smith, he, from looking at the footage, would drop his lead hand just enough for Burley to then throw the overhand right. And in terms of the technique, whether it was due to Smith's size or to create a more unpredictable angle, Burley's arching right hand would land over the top of the opponent's guard. While in some instances, it's clear he wasn't just aiming to hit the target, but to drive through it, much like the old school legends of Joe Louis or Rocky Marciano. And here's a great clip of Frank Gilfeather explaining how this technique should be properly used.
We know where the chin is, we know where the guy's chin is, all we've got to do is deliver this properly. So instead of that, which a lot of people do, which isn't bad, you've got to have real kind of devastation. Rocky Marciano, and you're back again, and everything goes. The head, the eyes even end up looking in the direction of where the punch is going.
As we can see, Burley really drives through that target. Although Charley Burley wasn't necessarily an inside fighting master, we could see he could handle himself effectively in the clinch against Oakland Billy Smith. And it was pretty evident he didn't want to fight in the inside all the time, particularly against a much bigger opponent, who for the most part was looking to apply pressure and brawl the smaller Burley. As discussed, Burley's jab and footwork were key to avoiding these exchanges. However, when necessary, he would use his shovel hook to get on the inside and smother Smith's work. In those close quarters, Burley would nullify Smith by underhooking his arms, preventing him from getting any punches off, or keeping one hand free so he could continue to attack. This technique is excellent for smothering and nullifying an opponent's ability to punch back when in the clinch. And Burley would then intelligently turn Smith towards the ropes, positioning himself advantageously with more space behind him towards the centre of the ring. Additionally, Burley used a clever trick by pressing his head against Smith's chest under his chin, a tactic we've seen top champions like Andre Ward, Gennady Golovkin and Julio Cesar Chavez use to control and destabilize their opponent. One of the most impressive aspects of Charley Burley's fighting style was his constant use of feints with the lead hand and strategic body positioning. These feints were vital for Burley to create momentary openings in Smith's guard and set up his counters. Burley often took advantage of his lower lead hand shell stance, probing or touching before stepping out of range. This would frequently draw Smith in, giving Burley the opportunity to counter with the left hook to the body or even throw an uppercut. And these subtle feints with his body or lead hand were often just enough to make Smith cover up or open up, allowing Burley to exploit this by changing his route of attack. For example, his inside slip spear jab or shovel hook would split through Smith's guard, deceiving him into thinking the left hand was coming, only for Burley to throw a big right hand. And Burley's constant use of variation with the lead hand were crucial in setting up Oakland Billy Smith. And I think from this fight alone we can see his mastery of feints and body positioning demonstrated how effectively these tactics can be used to create openings and set up attacks against your opponent, and I guess in the case of Burley, against a bigger opponent. As a pure boxer, Burley was clearly a defensive first fighter, if you haven't guessed already. And there are some key takeaways from his fight with Oakland Billy Smith, especially considering Burley was the smaller man. Impressively, Burley was never knocked out in 98 fights, which is pretty outstanding if you ask me. And I want to reiterate some of the key defensive elements, as this was key in Burley's success. Obviously keeping his head off the centre line for the most part would limit his opponent landing his right hand, while Burley's own right hand was often used to parry away any incoming jabs or block the left hook coming in. While again, once mentioned before, footwork played a crucial role in evading punches and advances, showcasing Burley's ability to move efficiently and maintain a defensive stance. Burley also demonstrated mastery with the shoulder roll, turning out and rolling Smith's right hand, then blocking the follow-up left hand before rolling again for another right. And this technique was way ahead of its time in the 1940s, and Burley was no doubt a precursor to the methods later popularised by the likes of George Benton, Floyd Mayweather and James Toney. And given that Burley hailed from Pennsylvania, where the shoulder roll is said to have originated, it's no surprise he utilised it so effectively. Furthermore, Burley's lead hand probes, feints and touches also helped to frustrate Smith, causing him to overcommit, overreach and walk into counters. Burley's first line of defence was his footwork though, combined with these elements making it a game of inches, as Andrew Ward demonstrates.
Let me tell you this real quick. These days, a lot of fighters are taught hands first. They never look at their feet. Just throw a jab, you're teaching the kid how to box. I was taught feet first. Learn to use your feet with the jab. So that way, throw at me. Just throw a combination. Control you with my feet. We don't have to throw a punch. I'm making you use your feet. And all of a sudden, I'm back up inside, and we're gonna fight the fight I wanna fight. Now, in the center of the ring, I don't even have to move that much. It's inches, but it starts with my feet, not my hands. Here, here. Throw a jab. Here, here. Boom. Got you. I'm off. So it's the feet that... Feet first. If you haven't trained your feet the way that I've trained my feet, you're gonna get tired. And we get into a situation where you have to move your feet faster than you want to, plus you're getting hit, it's gonna be rough.
And Burley's strategy against Oakland Billy Smith was primarily to outbox and counter him with impactful shots. And his ringcraft for me speaks volumes, particularly given the size and weight disadvantage he faced against Billy Smith. And Burley's ring generalship was extraordinary, as he consistently outsmarted and outthought Smith throughout the fight, exploiting his weaknesses by splitting his conventional guard, neutralising his strengths, while Charley's footwork helped keep Smith off balance, moving him to his left and stepping out of range to force Smith to commit, only to counter him as he came forward or smother his work on the inside. And overall, Burley's ability to control the pace and direction of the fight despite his size disadvantage demonstrates his genius to me. Not many fighters in history could defeat much larger opponents in such fashion and consistently fight after fight. In many ways, Burley's strategy and ringcraft can be seen in so many modern fighters, like Mayweather, Gervonta Davis, Devin Haney, and Terence Crawford. And these fighters all employ similar tactics and use of footwork, defense, and strategic counterpunching to outmaneuver and outbox their opponents, only for them to walk into something. Burley, for me, was truly ahead of his time, showcasing a level of ring intelligence and strategy that remains impressive even to this day, and even rare.
I mean, distance, excellence. He had pretty much all the tricks up his sleeve defensively. He could move, slip punches, counter, all of that good stuff. I mean, truly a remarkably skilled fighter. And I'll throw him in the mix with any of these modern guys. When we say the game has evolved, tell that to Charley Burley.
Burley was a welterweight who then fought at middleweight and would fight heavyweights. So that's one reason alone which proves how sharp his IQ is, because you cannot be an actual welterweight or middleweight and then fight men who are 70 pounds heavier than you without having a very high boxing IQ.
The best fighter you ever saw, Charley Burley. Charley Burley was an exception.
They still talk about you out in Minnesota.
Minnesota,
yeah. When you was out there, they tell me you was out there knocking out heavyweights.
That's the only thing I'm so sorry they just wouldn't give me a chance to win at the title.
Yeah, from what I know, you're not bitter about that.
No, that's the way it was supposed to be.
Charley Burley's impact on boxing extends beyond his own career, as his style, I think, has influenced future generations of fighters. Legends such as Archie Moore and Ezzard Charles spoke highly of his skills. For example, Archie Moore, considered one of the greatest light heavyweight champions, said the following about facing Burley. Charley Burley, pound for pound, the greatest fighter I ever faced. Charley gave me a licking and sent me back to school. I learned more in our fight than any other. That man was fantastic. He could lean away from a punch, be clear off balance, and knock your brains out with a counter. That night in Hollywood, Burley did things I've never seen anybody else do. He got away with things that would have got another fighter killed. He kept his hands low and could feint you with his head, his hands, his shoulders, his knees. But the thing that sticks in my mind the most about Burley is the way he defied gravity. He could lean way back on his heels. You'd figure, this man's way off balance. He can't break an egg from that position. Then you get the surprise. Burley could knock you dead from that position, and he could do it with either hand. I've been beaten in other fights. You look at my record. I've been in with a couple of 100 pros. I was bound to drop a few, but I never lost like I lost to Burley. He had me on the floor many times, but more than that, he outboxed me. That's something I could never understand, because nobody had ever done that to me before, and no one, incidentally, has done it since. I would say personally that I think Charley Burley could have beaten Ray in Ray's best time. And from just watching and studying the footage of him against Billy Smith, I can totally see where Archie Moore was coming from. It's just a shame he never got that fight with Sugar Ray Robinson, who apparently was scheduled to fight twice before being priced out, or should I say, avoided. Years later, Robinson actually said the following: anyone who would pursue a fight with Burley would have to be crazy. He was a tremendously dangerous fighter. I have to admit, I have my doubts that I could have licked him in my prime years. Once again, another huge compliment from a fighter who's considered boxing's pound for pound GOAT of all time. Now, another point I would like to make was Burley won the world welterweight and middleweight colour titles. Significant titles during an era where African American boxers were often excluded from competing for the primary world titles due to racial discrimination. And for me, these should be considered legitimate world titles in my opinion, especially when you consider how many belts are online today. Maybe one day Burley and others will be recognised as legit champions, despite never getting the chance for their full title in their career. Despite never getting the title shot, he won 16 of his last 18 fights, but eventually grew tired of the politics and continuous waiting for a world title shot. So he decided to retire at 32, working in garbage collection for the city. Burley eventually recognised 30 years later and was inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame in 1983, before he passed away in 1992 at the age of 75. For me, even modern fighters can learn a lot from studying his techniques, and despite the lack of extensive footage, Charley Burley's legacy lives on through the stories and accolades of those who witnessed his true brilliance firsthand. He may not have the extensive highlight reels of other legends, but the one fight we do showcases the extraordinary talent he possessed. His story is a reminder of countless of fighters who, despite their incredible skills, never got their due recognition. For me, Charley Burley was a genius and an uncrowned champion. This has been Jamie from Boxing Life. I'd love to hear your opinions on Charley Burley. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want more like this, I recommend you check out my video on George Benton, the original Philly Shell Master. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.